Evening, everyone. Hello. So, it's all going tits up again. So, I've been reading and listening to a lot of interviews with people trying to make sense of the Trump tariffs. More, not so much to try and make sense of why Trump is doing it. I mean, I think we take him at his word here. He genuinely believes that tariffs are the way to make the rest of the world pay for America to put its feet up. That's literally what apparently, I mean, lots of people have been citing since the 1980s what Donald Trump believes. So this has got nothing to do with Project 2025. This has got nothing to do with his tech bros. This is Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump as he's always been. However, we still need to try and work out what is the best way to react. Now, I'm just going to pick out a quick comment before I go over the first bit of this, but just to make sure. So Brad's asking there, could the dollar in time lose its reserve currency? If this happened, it would be Trump's ultimate bankruptcy. It would. It is entirely possible, although, sorry, someone's just said there. Jeffrey there said, I may be wrong, but I think Phil predicted not only that it could, but it will. No, I've certainly not predicted that. I'll just be clear. I don't make economic predictions. I'm not an economist. No, I've not. I've also not heard anyone really talk, and I've read a lot of economic articles and listened to interviews over the past week. I've not even heard people talking about it. People are talking about recession. People are talking about different markets banding together, cutting America out of supply chains and stuff like that. I've not heard anyone talking about the dollar losing its reserve currency status. So I'm going to guess that people do not think that is likely. But it is, of course, possible. But I'll tell you something, actually, in terms of these interviews, the Times Radio, the YouTube channel, has been doing a shift today. If you wanted to later on have a look at some quite interesting interviews, Times Radio YouTube channel has had some good stuff out today. And it's given me food for thought with some of the things that have been brought up. But the first thing I want to mention is actually something that was on LBC recently. Alan Sugar is a bit of a Piers Morgan character, isn't he, really? Sort of, there are times when you go, yeah, I agree with that. And there's other times when you go, can you just go away, please? But he made a very good point. So in terms of whether the UK should retaliate. Now, I will just say, I don't think, by and large, journalists or politicians are really being very responsible with their public discussions of what the government should do. There are risks with retaliating. There are risks with not retaliating. I actually don't think it's clear what is the correct thing to do, nor do I think a lot of people who are being honest do. Business leaders don't want us to retaliate. They're quite clear about that. I've seen some CEOs saying they do not want us to retaliate. Some people think we should. We don't know. But Alan Sugar made a really good point. So before, I was explaining that just the sheer amount we buy off America isn't enough. If we put tariffs on it, it's not enough to hurt Trump. Now, Kim Darroch, who was a former British ambassador to the US, had an interesting point today, which I'll bring up later. But Alan Sugar brought up another very good point, which I hadn't really considered, but actually just makes the idea of retaliating seem even more futile. So Alan Sugar was saying on LBC that he would absolutely instinctively want to apply retaliatory tariffs, but he said, how would you do it? So, because this is the thing, how would you do it? And if that sounds like a really silly question, what he means is, what specific products can you put a tariff on? Because remember what the purpose of retaliatory tariff is. Because remember, the importing market pays the tariffs. So when Trump's using these tariffs as a way to get the rest of the world to pay for America's taxes, because remember what he wants to do with it, he wants a combination of the Doge cuts and his tariffs to pay for an income tax later this year. That is what he wants. That's what he said. That's not reading between the lines. That's what he said he wants to do. The combination of cuts to the federal budget plus extra income from tariffs are going to pay for a cut to income tax. So But it's not foreigners paying it, it's American consumers paying it. But the same thing applies to retaliatory tariffs. Retaliatory tariffs for us mean we pay that. So what is the point of it? The point of it is you apply your retaliatory tariffs to make American imports more expensive so that some British consumers don't buy as much of them, which means American exports have to cut back, which means jobs lost in America. It means not as much profit, so the government doesn't get as much tax revenues, the whole caboodle, right? So that is the point of it. So you have to, when you're applying your tariffs, the whole point of it is to reduce the amount of American imports in order to hurt the exporters. Because if you just carry on buying the same amount but pay the tariffs, you don't hurt America. Doesn't hurt them. So then you think, so what do you put the tariffs on? Now, it's not a trick question. Let me just go through the top, because I had to look up what are our top imports, American imports. And this is quarter 3 2024, right? But the commodities on it are sort of roughly where they are. So let's go down the list. This is where you'd have the biggest impact if you put tariffs on it. So in quarter 3 of 2024, we bought £8.6 billion worth of American crude oil. Well, especially, I mean, there's different types of oil as well. You can't just like replace one type of oil with another part of the country, world, sorry. But also because of Russia's sanctions, we already have limited scope for getting oil anyway. So if we need this amount of American oil now, we're still going to need it anyway. So if we put tariffs on oil, we'll just put up the price of oil and oil derivatives, because we'll still need to buy the same. We're only buying what we need. We're not buying it. It's not a luxury item. This isn't something that consumers are buying in the supermarkets. This is something industry is buying. So if we're buying £8.6 billion worth in a quarter, it's because we need it. So if we put tariffs on that, we'll just raise the price. Then mechanical power generators. Well, we need these, which we're actually trying to go ahead with massively expanding our energy supplies. So again, we're buying what we need. So we can't really do with that. And this isn't something you could just get elsewhere either, because I'll tell you what's interesting is we also sell mechanical power generators to America. So there's a lot of like cross trade with it. So again, that trade won't go down with tariffs. We'll just charge ourselves more. Then medicinal and pharmaceutical products. We need them. Like we've already got drug shortages, NHS medicine shortages. The government's not going to do anything which exacerbates that or forces the NHS to pay extra for drugs. So we're still going to buy the same amount. So again, we're not going to hurt American oil exporters because we're going to buy what we need. We're not going to hurt the machinists, power generator exporters, because we're going to buy what we need. We're not going to hurt pharmaceutical companies because we're going to buy what we need. Refined oil, same thing with the crude oil. We're going to buy what we need there. Aircraft, I don't know. I suspect not. Is it possible for whoever's buying the aircraft, airlines and so on, to get them somewhere else? Well, they get the planes they're used to, don't they? So if you've got like British Airways, I don't know what they use, but let's say they use Boeing's 747s or whatever the hell it is, I don't know now. Whatever it is, if they're buying them, that's because what their pilots are used to flying, presumably. I can't imagine, I don't know a lot about it, I can't imagine airlines change the type of plane they buy very regularly. So none of these things could you really put a tariff on. And so if you think about the products that you could put a tariff on that we don't need, that would reduce those sales, there are some politically sensitive ones we could do, just like the EU do. We could put tariffs on bourbon from, Republican states. The EU will be putting them on jeans, presumably. That comes from Republican states as well. Someone did mention, everyone's always going to mention Teslas, aren't they? Someone's always going to mention Teslas. We don't really import a lot of cars from America of any kind. Even the Teslas we import, they're mostly produced in China or like Germany. So we're not going to obviously, we're not going to put retaliatory tariffs on the EU and China. So like, So that, I mean, that's a good point. Where do you put the tariffs? There's nowhere we can put tariffs where it'll hurt America. We can do some just for show. We can put tariffs on for show. We can put it on whiskey. We can put it on jeans, other clothing, because we can get those. We produce our own bloody whiskey. You know, we have whiskey in the country. So the best whiskey in the world. I'm certainly the original whiskey in the world. So, you know, we can certainly do that. We can do it on jeans. People don't need jeans. Get chinos. They're better anyway for some things. You could put it on cars, but we really don't import that many cars. Like, where do you put them? Put tariffs on American guitars, Fenders and so on. Yeah, but again, yeah, you could. You could absolutely do that. But where are they produced? I mean, you would only put tariffs on things that are produced in Republican states. So the jeans, yeah, because you wouldn't, I don't know where guitars, if they're produced in like Democrat states, no point because they're already fighting against the tariffs. But the point is, we can't put tariffs on things that will cause. No tariffs that we can put on American imports will shift the dial on the American economy. In the same, like Canada can, the EU can, China can, Mexico can, we can. So all you could do is make a show of it, which might still be worth doing. Like Kim Darroch, who's the former British ambassador to the US, was saying in his interview that the reason why he's okay at the moment, he says there's no need to do anything right now, but he says he's in favour of retaliating if the rest of the world does it. He says if everyone else is doing it, then it will make sense because then the concerted effort will work. My question with that, and he might be right, by the way, I'm not saying he's wrong. My concern with that is Trump, if he has to back down, doesn't have to back down with everyone equally. So he could back down with Canada, the EU, China, but then leave them or even raise them on smaller markets like the UK. So there's huge risk either way. Absolutely huge risk either way. Put a tariff on hot air and gas lights, the public deficit would be wiped out instantly. Well, very possibly. I did actually think earlier on we could maybe put an export tariff on public speaking, and then they'd have to pay more to have Nigel Farage talk at their MAGA rallies. But just to consider the situation. So in terms of, because obviously what Trump is doing. Oh, actually, before I go on, I just want to ask if are there any Americans in the chat? I want you to help me out here. Don't say so because then it'd be a minute before you can actually answer my question. Right, Trump. Now you can't really see it here, but I just want to point out. So this is Trump on the golf course. I'm not into golf, but I can recognise a golf course when I see one. Right. So this is him on a golf course. So he's having a leisure day, yeah. That's his leisure. Like Keir Starmer plays football. I think he still plays a bit of football as Prime Minister. I don't think he's really photographed doing it, so I'm not really sure if he does. I know he intended to carry on playing football. I don't know whether he does. But tell me if this is normal if you're in America, because it's not normal here. Because when Keir Starmer is playing football, I'll tell you what he doesn't do. This T-shirt that Trump is wearing, which is a casual, he's having a casual day, right? It says leisure day, so he's just wearing his normal stuff, yeah. So first of all, obviously, okay, it's got the US government crest there. That's fine, whatever. But then it's got his name. It says President Donald Trump on his right breast. Is that normal? Is that normal for politicians when they're like on a leisure day, just playing a game, to wear their sort of normal clothes with their name on it? Is that normal? Because that's not normal in other countries, I don't think. But anyway. Pete's Music, so I assume you know what you're talking about. Says many American brand guitars are offshored anyway to keep costs down. Well, there you go. I mean, that is another thing. I mean, the reason for the tariffs in the first place, of course, is because Trump wants to reintroduce onshoring. He wants to. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of American products, because it's quite funny. People are saying, well, we should boycott American products. And I'd first of all say there are some American companies who are still even now standing up to Trump. But even some of the ones who maybe aren't, they may not have come from America. They may, again, I'll put it up like you say it's normal for Trump, whatever that is. It's very bizarre though. You know, it's where are we again? You know, these are what we import. These are okay. It's our top 5. We import lots of other things as well. But if you look at the bottom one, aircraft, 2.9 billion. Now that's a quarter, not a year, but 2.9 billion. So everything underneath that obviously will have to be below 2.9 billion, and that's like that 5th place is 5.2% of imports. It shows you. So there'll be lots of commodities below it that are just like a few tens of millions, or it might be 100 million here or there. There's not going to be. So other commodities, we're not really going to buy that much from them. I don't think we're going to make a lot from Starman is his own number 10 football strip. But we don't do that. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to have a look at, so in terms of what I think is the best way to respond to this, is banding together. Trump is doing this because he is... the American economy is the largest economy in the world by some distance. There are some economies that are large enough to challenge it, but America stands tall above everything. And I'll show you something just to put it into context in a moment. But if you have economies banding together where they trust each other, then you can absolutely challenge this. So where have I got it? Here we go. So if you can't read it, unfortunately the writing is very small. On the left-hand side is the US, the size of the US economy. This is in trillions of dollars. So you've got the US economy. Then next to it, I can't read it on there myself, I have to read it. Then I've got the G7 minus 1, because obviously the US is in the G7. So if you take the US out and combine the economies of the G7, so it's like the G7 minus 1, I've called it. Not as big as America. It just shows you what a giant America's economy is. Not as big, but it rivals it. Then, of course, you've got the EU. That's, again, it's significantly below the size of the US economy, but it is strong enough to rival it. Then what I did is I did a Western alliance. So this is the EU plus Canada plus Japan plus Australia. These are countries that could conceivably work together, right, on a common response. Whether they do is another matter. But they can conceive, they're allied enough, they're close enough that they could conceivably work together on a response to this. That's quite significant. If you add Australia, Japan, Canada and the EU and the UK, sorry, I've put the UK in there as well. So Canada, UK, Japan, Australia and the EU. Actually, let me just double check that I did do that. Knowing me, I'll have forgotten to put the UK in because I'm an idiot. Let me just do that again. Because I keep thinking of the UK as being in. No, I didn't do it right. It's bigger. Right, I'm going to have to get rid of this. Sorry, that's my fault. I'm still spiritually in the EU. And I often forget we're not actually in the EU. It's bigger. The Western Alliance is bigger than America's thing. So I have to do it again. But the point is there are various ways that economies could group together and challenge the US. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily just do it in GDP as well. You might also do it in terms of values of trade, volumes of trade and so on. Come here. It's now messing me about. There we go. It won't make very much difference on the thing, but I need, I don't know why I forgot to put that in. There we go. So the Western Alliance, slightly larger than the US economy. And then, of course, on the end, I've put China there. Again, strong enough to, it's nowhere near as large as the US economy, but it's strong enough to rival it. And indeed is doing. It is doing. China could actually end up as a winner out of all this. And then rest of world. So that is the whole world's economy on the far right, minus the United States. So again, if the whole world acted in concert, it won't. It obviously never will. But if it did, or if a bulk of it did by economy size, then in actual fact, the United States would look very small by comparison. Jeffrey, they say, I'm still spiritual in the EU, aren't we all? Well, apparently not. No, not enough people. What's this about Starmer meeting world leaders to ask them not to retaliate with their own tariffs against the US? I don't know. I've not heard anything like that. I know he is talking to world leaders about a common response. I don't think he would urge them not to retaliate. He may, I mean, they'll talk about it, and he might talk about his own reasons for not retaliating. I can understand how some people do not want to trigger a trade war, but at the end of the day, again, it's all coming. It comes to this: there are three outcomes, aren't there? The preferred outcome is you persuade Trump to back down. The second outcome is the tariffs carry on pretty much as they are now. And the third outcome is actually a trade war. So that means lots. So technically, yes, you can understand some people being worried about the trade war, because then tariffs end up going all over the place in a tit for tat, and the whole situation and the global economy then goes into recession. But a trade war can also lead to the first outcome, where Trump backs down. But there is an argument. I mean, I mentioned in a video today, a former Italian economic advisor, as a left-wing one, by the way. So this is not someone who's in like Maloney's party, who was suggesting that, you know, the US will be in a recession in 6 months' time, and then he'll just naturally back down. Now, that's possible. So there will be some people who are thinking, just let America shoot itself in the foot, realise it shot itself in the foot, and decide to do something about it itself, and let's just get on with it in the meantime. But I've not heard anything about Starmer actively trying to persuade other countries not to retaliate. But it is a tricky question. Pete there says it's a great example of how confusing the whole message gets. It's incredibly confusing. Like, for example, I mean, some of the other things that various people have been saying today in these interviews are really quite, you know, are very interesting. Like, there was the former CEO of Aston Martin who was explaining the situation about, so tariffs, he described tariffs as a protective wall you build around a sick patient. The sick patient in this case being American car manufacturing, right? And he said the theory behind it is you protect it while you build it up, then you lower your trade barriers, and then you start to compete on the world stage again. But he said, but in reality, the way tariffs work is because they're shielding you from competition, you don't innovate, you don't know what your competitors are doing. So what happens in reality when you close those trade barriers again and start to try and compete globally, you go back onto the open market globally, you find that you've been overtaken by competitors, because if America closes off its car manufacturing industry, which is what it's trying to do, right? That's the aim. Then it has a monopoly on the American market. So it only has to be better than other American producers. In the meantime, China and Germany and other car producers, they're having to compete with everyone else in the world. So they will have to keep innovating to stay competitive. So then at some point in the future, if America is forced to lower those trade barriers, because if Trump's saying he wants to export, he wants to become this, I mean, it already is a huge exporter, but he wants to become this real exporting powerhouse. The rest of the world is going to insist that he lowers his own trade barriers. He's going to lower his own access to his own market to do that. So at some point they have to do that, at which point they will find that protecting the American car market has, in the words of this former CEO, made them fat and lazy. They'll get killed. Like Homer Simpson designing his car. Chris there said it was Tony Blair advising Starmer not to retaliate. Okay, I had heard that one, yeah. There will be arguments for and against. There's arguments for and against. At the moment, right, I mean, I'm not sure I'm all that optimistic about this trade deal angle. But while it's in the works, I would say don't do anything. Because there's also Ukraine to realize as well. Remember, this isn't... I know a lot of people are going to get focused on the trade war aspect of this. But and that's what matters to the rest of the world. That's what matters in Asia, for example, and in Africa and South America and the rest. But in Europe, we have these twin problems. So the trade, well, it's not a trade war until other people fire back. I mean, China already has, the EU probably will. But it will be a trade war, I think. But it's also the defense, the security situation with Russia. So we've got these. So the UK's got these twin problems. We're trying to work diplomatically with Trump in order to, one, reduce these trade barriers, but two, keep support for Ukraine. So it's incredibly it is incredibly tricky. John, they're saying my instinct alongside the EU is wallop the US back. Maybe it's best to watch what happens to the US economy over the next 6 months. Buy popcorn. Yes, as long as we don't have to buy the popcorn from America. Unless popcorn companies are against all this, I don't know. Where do we get popcorn from? We probably do import it from America, don't we? A lot of it. At least the kernels. World response should be a choice between two finger salute or the single finger. Well, yes, Matt, if the world would act in concert, that would absolutely be the case. Like I said, this rest of world bar is huge. This towers over the American economy. It's the only thing that does. But then you need the rest of the world to agree to work with each other. And the rest of the world hates each other. So, I mean, it's the essence of divide and rule, isn't it? The reason why Trump's plan won't work because it's born of idiocy. But the only reason it has any chance at all is the fact that you're not going to get the rest of the world agreeing to act as one on this. But you can get some major economies to do so. China will start shoring up support amongst various Southeast Asian countries, presumably, and African countries. So China can absolutely start to win out of this. And also, like going back to that car manufacturing thing, if America closes off its manufacturing, it doesn't have to be just cars either. If America closes off its manufacturing base, and remember, they're slashing funding for scientific research. They're attacking universities. Where's their research? Where's their innovation going to come from? Where are they going to get the people to come up with the new cutting edge technology when they're slashing funding for research and researchers? So if America closes off its manufacturing, it's going to be like the Soviet Union. It's going to produce shit. Or the Indian car market before it opened up. You know, Indian cars used to be appalling. They used to be terrible, didn't they? They were absolutely shit because they were just made for. They had a monopoly on the Indian public. They were just made, and only so many people could afford a car anyway. So they became much better when they opened their market up. But anyway. US imports a lot of corn also from Mexico for the sheer amount of corn sugar used in soft drink. Oh, okay. But there we go. I still think that Trump wants a recession or depression as a way to end democratic fight back, lean to him abolishing midterms in the general. He's not a strategist. I can't say it enough times. He's just an idiot with a Sharpie. That's what he is. There are some other people. I mean, it's not that there is no strategy to Trumpism, but things like this. I mean, yes, he wants to roll back democracy. That's evident. But this trade war has got nothing to do with any of the other plans. It's got nothing to do with Project 2025. His tech bros, like the likes of Elon Musk and co., who are trying to raid they're basically carving up the government for their own profit. They don't want this. This is Trump. This is pure Trump. No one other than a few lucky people, maybe. No one's making money out of this. The tariffs are there comes a point where you have to take Trump at his word, because it does fit his actions. For 40 odd years, he has believed, and he can prove it. He said so. He said, you can't say you're surprised. I've been talking about this for 4 decades, which he has. People have cited examples of the 1980s where Trump was arguing for not even a like a proto version of this policy, this exact policy that you whack massive tariffs on countries around the world, and then you get rid of income tax. That is what this is about. That's what he said it's about. I believe him. It fits his actions, and he has this idea you can just get rid of income tax with import taxes, which Americans also pay. I say those behind him know what they're doing. They're the ones pulling strings. Not on this. They'd rather he didn't do this. The rest of it, sure. This is him. This doesn't make anyone any money. Musk has lost a load of money over this. Thiel's lost a load of money. They've all lost money on this. All of them. But they just think it's still net good for them because they expect to make more money. Because what's happening, I'll tell you what's happening. Think about what happened in Russia with Putin. When Putin took over, what happened? He took national assets, right? Gave them to his oligarchs to run. And because they didn't know how to run them, they ran into the ground, right? But that's what he did. He just stole the state and divvied it up amongst his oligarchs who supported his position. That's what Trump aims to do. That's why Musk and co think that although they've lost a shitload of money, not just in the crash. I mean, Musk has lost a load because Tesla's now about as popular as, being fired into the sun. But they think they're going to make more by just having Trump divvy up the state and hand it over to them. He's literally trying to create a Russian-style oligarchy. Whether he succeeds is another matter. But that is what he's aiming to do. And that is what Musk and all the rest of them, they believe he's going to do it for them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this. This is crazy. They believe that America is not far. Like I saw on the news today, protests. I've seen Midas Touch. They over-egg things a bit, don't they? And they go, oh, huge protests. So apparently there were planned protests today in America. Now I don't know what the end numbers will be, but the preamble in the news was that they were aiming to get 500,000 people across 1,000 different protest sites in the country. That's pathetic. 500,000 people. Just to put it into context for people who are not in the UK. So the US has a population about 5 times the size of the UK. Right? It's 5 times bigger. The UK has had million plus protests in a single place in London. You wouldn't have it anywhere else. For the Iraq war and Brexit. Now, it didn't stop either of them. But in terms of a show of public protest, in the UK, we have had million plus protests multiple times in this country in my lifetime. America has never had a single million plus protest in one place. Which is, so anyone who's looking at the situation and thinking that America won't even really fight back against this, I'm looking at it and thinking, yeah, well, America has no history of fighting back against this at all. Rob there saying the chaos monkey in charge will never listen to anyone in his circle, especially if it makes sense. The thing is, he's deliberately created a circle that won't. So the point, like Kim Darroch again was making the point, and we saw this, that's not just his insight, we saw it last time. So when Trump was in power the first time, because if you're thinking to yourself, well, if Trump's wanted to do this for decades, why didn't he do it in his first term? He tried, right? He tried. But at the time, in order to seem credible, he hired competent people for government positions, right? So, and those competent people basically blocked him. They, they advised against it and stuff like that. Trump, of course, did eventually fire those people, but then he had COVID to deal with. So that was it. Couldn't do anything else. So Trump actually tried to do this the first time round. He blames the fact that he was surrounded by these naysayers for stopping it. So he spent the last few years making sure that when he comes back, he doesn't have those people around him anymore. He's only going to have people that tell him yes. He's only going to have positive people, yes men and women. So that's why Trump is now doing this. He's surrounded himself by people who will just tell him everything he's doing is great. Everything he's doing is great. They have to bend over backwards to say how great he is. And that makes it very difficult. I'm going to put this one back up. That makes it very difficult to get Trump. So Trump is probably not going to change his mind anytime soon, which is why there is absolutely no point in rushing for retaliatory tariffs. China's done it really quickly. They'd obviously worked them out well in advance. The EU may as well. I mean, Canada's done some. The EU may as well do some. They can certainly target politically sensitive things. As I say, jeans, bourbon, Harley Davidsons again. I mean, it doesn't make much difference, but, you know, can make a bit of a difference. Anything that will hurt important Republicans. Anything that will hurt them. I noticed Chris there saying at least Obama and Harris have finally developed a spine and stood up and attacked Trump's tariffs. Well, so in actual fact, yeah, I'd noticed Obama has finally said that people need to stand up to Trump. But from what Obama was saying, he wasn't really focusing on the tariffs. He was focusing on the attack on civil liberties, which arguably for Americans is a bigger deal. So, I noticed Obama was saying that it may well be that progressives actually have to sacrifice something. It's not, you know, in other words, he's suggesting that a placard may not be quite enough here, that you may actually have to just do without government funding. If, you know, I think his point was, if the government's going to say in return for this federal funding, you're going to have to adopt these policies, he's arguing, well, don't do without the money. It would be better. I think it was the comments were aimed largely at universities in this particular case. But yes, I have noticed that Obama, I didn't know about Harris, but I'd noticed Obama had actually spoken out now, because all of the former presidents were being very, very quiet. I assumed out of fear of reprisals. Don't wish death on people, but can we be thankful Trump is 78 and not 58? Yeah, but he's also a billionaire with billionaire healthcare. He could be 98 before he goes. People put too much faith in the McDonald's. It's like it's not killing him. If anything, like ordinarily with a normal person, you notice a symptom, you go to the doctor, may or may not be too late. With him, he's having scans done all the time. Anything pops up, his doctors will notice it before he notices anything. And I honestly don't wish death on people either, in all honesty. I want him to go to prison. But, you know. China is now more financially reliable, stroke dependable. Well, it is, and China has always been dependable. And indeed, we may well have to work more closely. In fact, the Starmer, remember, I keep pointing out, it's been clear that the UK has recognised this day for some time, because as soon as it was announced that Trump won the election, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the Labour government instantly changed its attitude towards China. At the time, we were vocally critical of their treatment of the Uyghurs. Now, we're just sort of saying we disapprove behind closed doors. We're not making a big public show of it anymore. And that was straight away. They basically said as much straight away. They expected Trump to destate. I don't know that they necessarily expected exactly what he was going to do, but I think they did take him at his word that he was going to, you know, shake shit up. And it may well be. I noticed China is sort of making representations to Europe as well. So again, China's making the offer of closer ties with Europe. We just have to be a little bit careful. China is, of course, going to be a more dependable economic partner, but it's not exactly a defense or security ally, is it? Being honest. So it's tricky. Katie, they're saying, Phil, can you explain if there's any way to get back in the customs union, even though it would be breaking a manifesto promise? How could it be sold to the public? Like any breach of manifesto, you'd sell it to the public as change of circumstances. I would like to see more discussions about the costs of Brexit. I would like some analysis of what it would be worth. It would be worth billions, like a lot of billions as well, customs union. So yeah, it could be worth up to 30 billion. I'd like to see an up-to-date figure, but it could be worth up to 30 billion in trade, just the customs union. The single market is more valuable if you had to choose between the two, which is why there are more countries in the single market, but not the customs union. However, we can't do that quickly. I mean, in theory, I suppose the EU could fast track us and do it in a year, but there's no, and also that is a bigger one for the British public, because then you've got the freedom of movement and all the rest of it in there. Customs union, I mean, I've said it before. I mean, I've talked to Brexit supporters in the wild, right? And they'll all think they know what the single market is. When it comes down to it, they tend not to when you ask them questions, but they think they know what the single market is. I have not met a Brexiteer in the wild who even claims to know what the customs union is. They don't know. They just know it's something to do with the EU, so it's bad, right? But they don't actually know what it is. So I think you sell it to the public by, this is the situation. We don't want to put up taxes. We don't want to make any more cuts. If we were to negotiate, you might not even have to use the term customs union, but you probably would have to admit it was a customs union. But if you were to say, we want to have a closer trading relationship, which now includes customs alignment, you know, be cunning with your language if you want, cute with your language, and it would be worth 20, 30 billion pounds to the UK economy, I think that's how you sell it. I'm not getting the impression that Labour are even gearing up, because if they were even seriously thinking about it, I would expect a few little things to come out in public, such as the cost of Brexit, and that's not really coming out. So but even without that, remember, we could still boost our trade with the EU with, there's lots of things you can do that fall short of those red lines that would still be worth billions, over 10 billion to the economy. Get China to sort our housing problem, pay them in pounds so they can diversify their foreign reserves. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I do know we are going to have to import a load of people to build these houses. Labour have put aside money for that. I don't know where we'll import them from. It was Portugal last time. The problem is getting all 27 EU members to agree to the UK join the customs union. I don't think that would be an issue. You say Hungary will veto it every time. No, it won't. They'll twist Orban's bollocks again. I mean, I mean, I can't know. I think the EU would be up for it. And if it always happens, obviously. I mean, you would think it's mental to have any votes at all where you need a unanimous opinion, but you always get it. Because all that happens is you just do a bit of horse trading. Smaller countries usually just trade for that vote. So if the rest of the EU really wanted it and we asked for it, you would just twist Orban's bollocks until he behaved himself. Just like we did over the NATO. Remember, he was trying to block the latest NATO memberships. It went through. Labour are so behind the curve. Again, I think it's loose thinking to think that. We don't really know what the public opinion is on it. Almost all polls, in fact, do not really tell you, because I will always caution this with polling. It's very common to produce a poll asking the public, do you want this outcome? But that most polls are actually, even by the good pollsters, are very poor quality polls. If you're going to try and say that the public are in favour of a policy, you not only have to ask them if they're in favour of the outcome of the policy, but the mechanism of it as well. So you have to be clear. Like, for example, there was some polling done about raising taxes last year ahead of the budget. I can't remember who did it now, but it might have been YouGov, but I can't remember. And it was like, so do you want this? People were broadly in favour of the tax rises, right? So then it was like, okay, do you want Labour to raise these taxes? No. These taxes? No. It doesn't matter which one came up. There was always a majority against it. And that's the problem. This was the problem ultimately of Brexit, wasn't it? It's like 52% of people who voted were in favour of Brexit. But if they'd have been asked, are you in favour of this Brexit or this Brexit, there would never have been a majority. And that is ultimately a problem with polling. If the poll only asks about the outcome without the mechanism, people imagine a mechanism that they approve of, but that's not necessarily how you'll achieve it. So for all I know, the public might be against the customs union. I just have no evidence to say that they are. I have evidence that the public would be against, at this point, single markets because of freedom of movement. I can't think of any polling I've seen which suggests any problem with customs union. I think it may well have been a mistake that Labour made in ruling it out. But it may not have been. They may have had internal polling that said, no, we need to rule this out as well. I don't know. What I do know is that the public in a tough spot will accept that the unforeseen... Trump came to power after Labour came to power, right? After the manifesto. Trump, with these massive tariffs, all of it is... You can sell it to the public as, look, this is a bit of a serious situation. This is what we need to do. I think maybe Labour are being a bit too timid on this. But we will see. The major talks will be next year anyway. Nothing will happen quickly. Nothing will happen quickly here. These tariffs are in place. It's possible that Labour could, in the next few weeks, agree a trade deal and get them reduced or removed. I don't expect it. I'll tell you another good point, actually, as well, about the tariffs that someone made today. So if I get back... So if I put back up our import, this is imports from America, but I haven't prepared a slide for it. If I read off the exports, because people are going, okay, so we're not doing too badly off. We got 10% tariffs. The EU got 20%. Japan got like 24%, I think it was. So, and that's why some people think there might be scope there. As long as our tariffs don't go up, there may be scope there. However, that 10% is baseline. Our number one biggest export to America is cars, and cars has 25%. So our effective tariff rate is obviously greater than 10%. It's not 25% because it's not only cars we export to America, it's just our single biggest export. But nonetheless, that is our single biggest export. It's our most important one. Do I believe there'll be civil war in the USA? I think it's not. I think it's possible. I think it's a country where you are encouraged to be armed to the teeth. I mean, I saw a meme again the other day. Another reason for Canada not wanting to be the 51st state. In Canada, we do not queue up for our burgers with a missile launcher on our back. It actually had a fellow with like a pissing bazooka or missile launcher on his back in a fast food outlet. What's that about? I mean, you're used to these cretins walking around with guns and stuff. Who the hell walks around with a ballista, a modern ballista? This would be like some in the medieval ages trundling a catapult around with them while they did their shopping. So, yeah, America is a country where you are encouraged to be armed to the teeth. So the concept of a civil war surely has to be a very real prospect. But of course, Trump will love that, won't he? Because he gets to crack down, get the National Guard in there, put it down, martial law. Jobs are good. But the possibility has to be there. Wang Pegan, they say, Labour have been very quiet about the treatment of their sister party in Turkey, the CHP party, been called out by them for it. Could Labour's silence be due to the Ukraine situation? Honestly, have no idea. It could be just due to a flooding the zone situation, the fact there's so much shit going on they can't keep on top of everything. I really couldn't tell you. It is possible, I guess. Two of Putin's early red lines were Ukraine joining NATO or the EU. And yes, because he doesn't want Ukraine to have allies. He doesn't want them to have alliances that people will fight for. Because if it's in the EU, then Europe will actually... Because at the moment we have this mad situation where Russia is on its arse. It's absolutely on its arse. It's crazy to me that European powers are actually going out their way to say, we do not want to put our troops on the front lines. We'll put troops in for peacekeeping, but not on the front lines. There is zero risk of us getting into a hot war with Russia. And it's like, okay, no one wants a hot war with Russia. But if Russia insists on it, why are we, by ruling it out, we're only inviting him to come closer and closer to the point where we have to. Surely it would be better to actually just kick them out in the first place. I gather there's more North Korean troops coming into the picture. They're going to be deployed in Crimea, I believe. But anyway. Prince Andrew wants to get back on the royal gravy train. Should we let him host Trump's state visit? No. I think the best thing you can do with Prince Andrew is to ostracise him completely. For the good of, frankly, everyone. Himself included. Saw a video of a guy with an AR-15 in a Subway sandwich shop. What is an AR-15, by the way? Is that a rocket launcher? Maybe the same one. Labour MP Dan Norris suspended after arrest for suspected rape. Bloody hell. Is that true? Hang on. Where's that gone? That's not in the news. To be fair, if you're deemed mentally unwell in Utah, that limits you to 2 handguns, so they have some controls. Yeah. They will just be the cannon fodder. You'll just put them in when the Civil War starts. They'll just be the guys at the front, the forlorn hope. 2 handguns will be all they need. They won't last long enough to empty them both. Aren't most of the UK cars exported to the USA the high-end ones like Aston Martin, Bentley, etc.? People are not like to be price sensitive. So interesting point there. So, first of all, yes, a lot of the cars we export are high-end. However, we do also export Land Rovers, which are not the cheapest, but they're not high-end either. Exports of Land Rovers have already stopped. They've been suspended. And also Volkswagen Golfs. That is not anyone's idea of a high-end car. So we export quite a few of those as well. So those would still be affected. There are some high-end ones as well. But I'll tell you what was interesting. So I thought as well, yes. So at least the luxury cars, you're selling them to people who've got plenty of money. If they want it, they'll just pay the extra. And okay, that's true. But this former CEO of Aston Martin actually said that that's not the way it works. That in actual fact, although yes, those potential customers could afford to pay the extra, they won't. Because they don't like thinking that they're being ripped off. And if the price of something suddenly increases by like 25, 30% or something, they'll feel like they've been ripped off. So he says in practice, they are just as price sensitive. And I can sort of believe it, because I mean, I sometimes struggle to understand that, because for example, if I want something and I can afford it, I get it, right? Whereas my wife actually is different. She's quite generous with me and other people, but she's tight with herself, tight as a duck's arse, in fact. And there are times where she wants a thing and she'll look at the price. Oh no, that's 50p too much. I'm not. Or, oh no, it's got postage and packing of £2. I'm not paying it then. And so, yeah, I suppose rich people are just the same. They have their own idea of what is good value. Even if you know, from my point of view, if you're that loaded, it's like, bloody hell, I mean, just what you're going to do with the money, just spend it for Christ's sake. If you can afford a brand new Bentley or Aston Martin, then you've got money. You aren't just sat on a pile, you've got money coming in, right? But people don't, you know, there are people who want value. So, you know, apparently Aston Martin will suffer just like everyone else. And this former CEO was saying, yeah, there will absolutely be redundancies. They will not be able to sell as many. If we are to have commitments with anyone else, it makes it incredibly hard to claim our country as core Russian territory. Example like Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, not seen as Russian territory anymore. Well, yes, there is that as well. BBC's reporting on it, is it? Okay. Let us see. Dear me. Right. Oh, he was the guy who beat Jacob Rees-Mogg. Okay. MC, they're saying, good to hear our chances in the customs unit in the near future are good. I don't think they are. It's just that, like, because I'm not seeing any sign that Labour are even, like, if they were even thinking about customs union, even in a year's time, I would expect them to be preparing the groundwork now. Like, think about all the controversial policies Labour have already introduced since the election. Every single one, they laid the groundwork for it. With things, with like leaking little things and then refusing to deny it and stuff like that. I've seen nothing. I've not even seen a suggestion. The way to mitigate Trump's like, if you ask the government, if any government minister says anything about the way to deal with Trump, it's always in terms of this trade deal. It's never in terms of, it's rarely in terms of and closer trade with Europe, even though they are pushing for that. So yeah, I don't see it. Spending sweet fatty arbuckle is how rich people stay rich. I suppose there is that as well in some cases. I mean, I did read of one guy, for example. This is a British millionaire who came from, he made his money like he was poor, and he says, so he lives in like this big posh house now, fancy, but in the shower he still showers with a bucket. As in, he's in a shower. The shower's a posh shower, but there's a bucket in the shower, which catches a lot of the sort of excess water, which he then uses to flush the toilet. And he says he does because, he did this. This was his habit when he was poor, and he still does it now. So, yeah. I thought the Brexit deal thing next year was a review, not a renegotiation. It is, but both sides want a much closer deal. It's not a rubber stamping exercise. Both sides want significant changes made to it. So that creates the environment for a renegotiation. Oops, sorry, knocking things over. Assuming membership of the customs union is a possibility, why on earth aren't Labour going for it? It will be for political reasons. They will believe, whether they've got good reason to believe it or not, I cannot know. But they will believe that it would be bad politically. And as I would say at the moment, there's a sense in which I can sort of understand Labour's timidity, because it's a bit like with the economy. I can understand them being a little bit timid on the economy, because if you get something badly wrong, you've messed it up, right? So let's say they apply some sort of tax that could, in theory, hit investment. If instead of raising £5 million, it loses you £10 billion, that's it, you've knackered it, you've blown it. And and you will lose your economic credibility. And the same thing with something like this. Labour are also struggling in the polls, right? Partly their fault, partly not. But they are struggling in the polls. It's not good. And they may fear anything that might cause a backlash. So even if there are, and I know David Lammy, for example, is reported to be arguing for the customs union. There may be others. So even if some are arguing, no, we need to do this because it'll do this and this and this. If there are some in the cabinet that are going, yeah, but what if it goes, what if, because the Brexit papers will go mad about it. What if it goes badly wrong? So I think at the moment, the poor economic situation and the constantly worsening economic situation and the poor polling situation and things like another pissing Labour MP being arrested aren't going to help. And bastard electoral cycle, then you can sort of see, whether it's right or wrong, how that can get people to be a little bit more bunker mentality. If Starmer's calling for an economic reset, how will that look? Again, it depends how you sell it. Maybe Labour just realised they're not very good at selling messages. It depends how you sell it. I would sell it. I'd be really clear. I would say this would be worth, get the Treasury to work out what it'd be worth. I would say this would be worth 30 billion quid a year or something like, whatever it happens to be. You know, I would get the Treasury to work it out and say, we reckon it'd be worth this much to the economy. And then you can put it in terms of how many jobs that would equate to. So say this would be worth about 30 billion quid to the economy. Then work out, we reckon it would generate this many jobs. Do a public consultation on it. So that way you're not just doing it. It's not a fait accompli. You say, we'll run a public consultation. Times have changed. We promised not to do this. We're not going to do it without consulting the public. You run a public consultation. Public consultations can be fiddled easily anyway, but you might not even need to. Run a public consultation, say, what do you think, people? It's not a referendum as such. It's just getting people's views. Do it that way. But I think they're just a bit afraid at the moment of doing anything, because everything's so tight, you know, polling's tight and the economy's tight. I think everything's so tight that they're just like frozen, paralyzed, like rabbit in headlights type situation. And maybe if in a year's time things look better, although that's a big if, isn't it? But if they did look better in about a year's time, maybe they'll be a bit more confident, but who knows? Mention a change in direction with advisors, not just economists. How can we be so certain that psychologists can help with strategy? Well, because dealing with anyone is psychology anyway, isn't it? But Trump is usually what happens is you have political advisors and diplomatic advisors and so on, and they've been used to dealing with so many senior politicians and officials and so on that all behave the same way, that they're confident enough to do that. Whereas you now have someone in Trump who does not behave normally. He doesn't behave like a politician. He doesn't behave like a technocrat. He doesn't even behave like a property tycoon. Because he's an idiot. He has no expertise in anything. He's not even an expert in running businesses. He just created this character that's good at business, even though he's terrible. You know, it keeps being said, he made 2 casinos go bankrupt. Casinos are a license to print money. You can't go back. You can't make a casino go bankrupt. If you can afford to, and you can get the licensing to run that's the only way you can make a casino go bankrupt. You lose your license. Anything more being heard about citizens' assemblies? I noticed a Green MP brought the issue up in Parliament in the last week, but I haven't heard anything from the government. No, the government are still, in theory, not really keen on them. Behaves like a Roman emperor. Yeah, the one that made a horse a senator. I mean, plenty of Roman emperors knew their stuff. He was the one who, was it Caligula? I can't remember. One of them made a horse a senator. That's him. That's what he is. Like the guy, for example, of Witkoff, isn't it? The guy whose job it is to negotiate with Russia and Ukraine. It's his job to negotiate a very difficult peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Is he a diplomat? No, he's not. Has he got any experience in negotiation? No. He was a golf buddy for Trump. He played golf with Trump. He's a fellow property tycoon. You know, that's what Trump does. That's how he ended up putting tariffs on penguins, because he's not giving these jobs to, it's not even like he's an idiot and he's giving the jobs to competent people. He's giving the jobs to his mates who know nothing, or they know nothing about the jobs he's giving them anyway. But anyways, I mean, confirmed it was Caligula. There you go. behaves like a classic narcissist. Ah, well, I forget the word. Someone's going to put it up for us at the last point. But apparently, it's worse than that. A psychologist said he behaves more like something beginning with S or something, which is like a super narcissist. So a narcissist does care what other people think of them and things like that. They care about other people. Whereas Trump is this other thing where there's like only Trump. There are no other people. Whereas for a narcissist, other people exist. They're just more important. Whereas for Trump, no one else even exists, really. But anyway, it is what it is. We'll leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Very good stream. Have a great evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.